want to get to this fantasy. And Anat, you and I have been talking about this for a while. I want to talk about the fantasy that is New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is somehow like the new champion of the resistance. And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is somehow like filling the leadership vacuum here because he can construct full sentences, unlike Joe Biden, because he talks competently, because optically he sounds like a leader every day during his press conferences. Andrew Cuomo, I'm not saying Andrew Cuomo is responsible for all 1,500 deaths in New York. That would be a reckless statement. Of course, that's not true. But Andrew Cuomo, and a lot of you don't like that I have called for this. Andrew Cuomo should have called for a quarantine in New York State 2 weeks ago. My girlfriend and I were talking about it 2 weeks ago. New York State, and New York City in particular, has a very, very high percentage of people who travel from other countries into the city, in New York. I'm not trying to be anti-Chinese right now. I love Asian people, but the bottom line is New York City has a lot of Asian people, and a lot of them go to and from China quite frequently. So New York City, between Asian people, we have a lot of people from Europe, a lot of people from all around the world are here in New York City. So the coronavirus, this state and this city, you can't trace. They say contact tracing. There's no way to trace who has it in New York City, who has it in New York State. But Governor Cuomo, when he was called on, and by the way, just so you know the numbers here, over 75,000 cases have been identified in New York. When a cluster of coronavirus cases was first reported in the New York City suburb of New Rochelle, which, by the way, my older brother, his wife, their 2 children live right there where that cluster is. They were in the heart of this. They have been under quarantine for a month now, I think. Local and state officials raced to contain the outbreak. The National Guard was deployed. Drive-through testing began. Epidemiologists attempted to find contacts of the first patients. Okay, so over 75,000 cases in New York. Over 1,500 people have died in New York, and that number is going up rapidly. But when people asked Governor Cuomo about quarantining, he said absolutely not. That would be a, quote, federal declaration of war, he called it. It would be chaos and mayhem to do that. It's totally opposite everything he's been saying. I don't think it's plausible. I don't think it's legal. A lockdown is what they did in Wuhan, China. We're not in China, and we're not in Wuhan. I believe it would be illegal. As a governor, I'm not going to close off my borders, he added. I'm not going to get into the legality because I'm not a lawyer. I don't think it's illegal. But the bottom line is this. I understand people who are very afraid of big government, of tyranny, believe that would be an encroachment of civil liberties, all that. Okay, well, there's body bags piling up 10 blocks from me right now. There's a hospital 10 blocks from me right now with body bags piling up. They are piling up all over this city. On Long Island, where my parents live, people are dying. Upstate New York, Westchester County, people are dying. Meanwhile, because he hasn't issued a quarantine, stupidity like this is going on. Guidance, if you guide people to do something in a city with, how many people live in New York City? 8 million? This is people not social distancing, packed like sardines, waiting for the ship that Trump was sending into New York Harbor, which is going to be a makeshift hospital because the hospitals here are being overrun. And guess what? People watching as that ship come in might end up in that hospital. because this governor has not issued, yes, it would be burdensome, but what is more chaotic? 2 weeks where you can't leave your home? Or emergency rooms that look like war zones? Body bags piling up? Nurses with garbage bags wrapped around them because they don't have the proper equipment? Hospitals being overrun? Medical equipment's running out? This governor had the opportunity to lead 10 to 14 days ago, issue a quarantine of New York State. I think the New York City mayor, Bill de Blasio, has been behind this too, but he said he was thinking of doing a quarantine in New York City, and the governor said he would not allow it. Well, because you think it's illegal? Trust me, if you live in New York and you know New York politics, many of Andrew Cuomo's top aides have been arrested on corruption. He's not exactly a bastion for legality. He's no angel, Governor Cuomo, even though MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post have been drooling over him for the last week, because unlike Joe Biden and unlike Trump, he could construct full sentences, and he's not, that we know of, lying every other breath. And by the way, I do send our well wishes, because Chris Cuomo of CNN tested positive. I'm not a big CNN person. I'm not a big Chris Cuomo person, but obviously I want him to get well. We all should. So this guy is a hero who should have quarantined New York State 2 weeks ago? This is the hero? Because by the way, as he chose not to quarantine New York State, he's also, at this very moment, they're failing to mention this, he's calling for $2.5 billion in Medicaid cuts. 2.5 billion with a B in Medicaid cuts, including 400 million in trims to hospitals based on a recommendation made months earlier, and he has not revived or altered this after the crisis. Cutting Medicaid would leave New York on the outside of 6.7 billion in federal aid. But Cuomo has responded to that not by standing down, but by saying, quote, "We can't do a budget without changes to Medicaid." Yeah, change Medicaid at the time when millions of New Yorkers, well, I shouldn't say millions, tens of thousands of New Yorkers are getting laid off, aren't going to have health care, and might need Medicaid. Let's cut 2.5 billion in Medicaid. Wow. What an amazing leader Andrew Cuomo is. Such an amazing leader because unlike Trump, he sounds coherent. Such an amazing leader because unlike Biden, he knows where he is when he speaks. The bar has been set so low that Andrew Cuomo is considered the new leader of the establishment Democratic Party, and now theories are going on that they might swap Biden out for him. By the way, as Dave Dayen in The Prospect points out, as recently as March 6, Cuomo was reassuring New Yorkers irresponsibly that, quote, "We have far more people in the hospital from the flu than COVID-19. He has also been reckless on not emptying the jails. Rikers Island right now is a literal health emergency. It is in the midst of an outbreak of coronavirus because Andrew Cuomo has refused to empty the jail. Over 300 inmates and staff are already infected. Upstate prisoners are making hand sanitizer for 65 cents an hour. However, so maybe they could pilfer some of that and hope for the best. He's basically leaving people in jail to die. I mean, it's not just Andrew Cuomo, by the way. If you live in Florida, the Republican governor there has been absolutely reckless. A week ago, there were still people on South Beach, spring breaking. I don't know if they still are. There's governors, Democrats and Republicans, that have been completely reckless. And frankly, President Trump, the buck stops with the president. He should have called for a national lockdown. Italy did that, and as bad as it got in Italy, after 2 weeks of a lockdown, the numbers started going down. But because, oh no, We're capitalists. We can't shut down the economy for 2 weeks. They'd rather do this makeshift bullshit that we've been doing, where every state has a different system. One state has a shelter in place, another state has guidance, other states have, strongly recommend you stay in. Not. Wasn't there people in Central Park like a week ago? I just showed you the image of people gathering to watch this boat come into New York Harbor. So as health officials in Washington, D.C. are working to, as they say, what are they saying? Something the curve? Flatten the curve. Because New York Governor Andrew Cuomo suddenly cares about the law and doesn't want to, that would be a federal declaration of war. I believe this is a war. And you know what? I'd rather a leader take leadership, even if a lot of people don't like it, because a lot of people wouldn't like a 2-week quarantine. By not doing that, over 1,500 people have died in New York. That's half of the death count in America. A lot more people are going to die. And because it's a novel coronavirus, we do not know everything about the coronavirus. Who the hell knows if it's going to come back? Anthony Fauci said it might come back during the fall. This is not a leader. This is someone who speaks well, who commands an audience during press conferences, who seems like he's on top of it, while behind the scenes he's cutting $2.5 billion in Medicaid. And oh, by the way, if that wasn't good enough for you, guess what else he's doing? Governor Cuomo is putting private equity vultures in charge of the coronavirus recovery in New York. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced at a press conference on Monday, March 23rd, that he was charging his former high-level aides, William Mulrow and Stephen M. Cohen, with rebuilding New York's economy in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Cuomo's former aides have deep ties to Wall Street. Mulrow is a senior advisory director at the private equity giant Blackstone Group, and Cohen is chief administrative officer of McAndrews and Forbes, the conglomerate owned by billionaire Cuomo donor Ronald Perelman. Mulrow's specific conflicts of interest raise grave concerns that New York's recovery efforts could abet Wall Street profiteering as the state's millions of working-class people suffer. In addition to his position at Blackstone, Mulrow holds lucrative board seats at a major gas and electric utility, a real estate developer, and a mining company, all of which creates tremendous conflicts of interest with a just recovery. Putting Wall Street insiders in charge of New York's economic recovery raises concerns that the state's response to the global economic collapse precipitated by the coronavirus pandemic will prioritize the profits of billionaire investors and further entrench New York's deep economic inequality. If you don't know, New York has the highest rate of income inequality in the nation, number one. And by the way, on a federal level, because let's not let the Republicans off the hook, guess who Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is putting in charge of the coronavirus bailout? A Morgan Stanley executive. Yep. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.